If one day your husband shared what he claimed were the most beautiful memories between the two of you in front of all your friends, but more than half of them actually belonged to another woman, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. My name is Jessica. During a gathering with friends before our wedding, David, my husband, drank more than usual, his face flushed, his wide smile lighting up the whole table. Someone in the group teased loudly, "Come on, tell us the 8 most unforgettable memories you two share." He leaned back in his chair, laughing as he eagerly began to recount them. But every word he spoke felt like sharp knives stabbing straight into my heart. Out of 8 memories, 5 had nothing to do with me. Each time he mentioned a detail that belonged to someone else, my hand under the table curled one finger tighter, until by the end it was clenched into a fist, as if holding on to the last fragile remnants of my dignity. His friends clapped and cheered loudly after his 8th story, exclaiming, "You must love her so deeply." I sat beside him, forcing a mechanical smile. No one knew there was a storm raging inside me. He was still a little drunk, clapping along with the others, his bright eyes locking onto mine. And for the first time, I realized, all this time, I had never truly known the man I married. Amid the cheering, he leaned in, trying to kiss me, but I gently pushed him away, whispering, "You're drunk. You smell like alcohol." But deep down, I knew. It wasn't the alcohol I smelled. It was the scent of memories that didn't belong to me. In that moment, I understood. Our story had carried the shadow of another woman all along. And the very first memory he shared, kissin' under the pouring rain, was something he had once done with someone else. Not me. I used to dream of a moment like that. A romantic kiss in the rain. But it turned out it was never mine to begin with. And yet my husband, after drinking too much, confused his memories of me with those of another woman. He didn't notice anything strange in my eyes, thinking I refused his kiss only because I was shy in front of our friends, while I sat there, finishing one glass of water after another, listening to the faint clinking of ice against the glass like counting each beat of my heart, then getting up repeatedly, using the bathroom as an excuse, the cold water on my wrists, the spotless mirror, the fresh layer of lipstick I'd just reapplied instantly fading again. I couldn't even remember how many times I went until he finally noticed something was wrong. Taking my hand, his voice softened by alcohol. "Jessica, are you okay? If you're not feeling well, let's go home." But in my head, I was stuck on the second story he had just told, a story that also had nothing to do with me. She only said one sentence that she wanted to see me, and I left an important meeting to rush over. And honestly, what he called romance felt childish to me. An impulse that might have been endearing in your late teens or early 20s. But standing at almost 30, I found it laughable and absurd. One person knowing the other is in a meeting, yet still says, "I want to see you." And the other, knowing it's just a passing whim, still recklessly runs off. When he pulled me outside, I looked at his back. The same back that had once held my hand walking through countless streets. And for the first time, I realized, behind that figure, it had never been just me. I took him home, placed the keys on the table, watched him stagger into the bedroom, and then turned away. Before leaving, I casually picked up our wedding ring from the coffee table. It felt as heavy as a stone in my palm, a silent proof of a love that had never been whole. The ring we had spent hours choosing together after so many rounds of deliberation, sitting side by side over the design on a screen, creating a piece that belonged to us alone. And when we finally settled on it, we both laughed, proud that our individual ideas had come together. We used to be proud of that, yet tonight he didn't mention it even once. I drove off, heading to the place where we had gone on countless dates, the same place where we first met. That day, I was tired from reading, resting my head on my knees when he walked down the steps, thinking I wasn't feeling well, and asked, "Do you need any help?" He did mention that story tonight, even saying, "It was a small act of concern that unexpectedly touched her heart. In matters of fate, I guess I got a little luckier." And he had deliberately chosen that very spot to confess his feelings to me. He stood up and said, "I have something to tell you." And suddenly, our friends appeared from everywhere, lighting up their phones, helping him stage the confession. And he asked, "Jessica Evans, will you be my girlfriend?" We walked down the steps, hand in hand, and I suddenly remembered the bouquet I had left behind, turned back to pick it up, and discovered tiny notes stuck under the steps, all reading, "Jessica, I love you." I turned to him, and he grinned smugly. "Impressive, right?" He even brought up that story tonight, boasting, "To confess my love, I stayed up half the night hanging heart-shaped balloons and writing love notes." And everyone at the table chimed in together. We remember," showering him with praise for being thoughtful and devoted to me. And back then, I believed it too. Only tonight, amidst the applause and the lingering scent of alcohol on his shirt, I realized I had just listened to a detailed report of his love life. But 5 out of those 8 stories had nothing to do with me. He woke up groggy once, called me with a hoarse voice from the alcohol, asking why he couldn't find me at home. I leaned back against the chair, staring at the glowing blue screen, and said I had a few things I didn't know how to handle yet, so I went out for a walk, hearing the faint clinking of hangers on his end. He said he wanted to come out and look for me, but I quickly stopped him. "Don't make a mess, just go back to sleep." Then reassured him, "I'll be home soon. It won't take long." He sighed and advised me, "Jessica, don't waste your energy on things that upset you. There are always other things that can replace them, things that can even bring you a better response. By hesitating like this, you're only torturing yourself." I stayed quiet for a moment before asking, "That night, how long did it take to prepare the proposal?" He thought for a bit. "Probably 5, 6 hours. All right. Then I would make my decision in those same 5 or 6 hours." He called my name and said, "This feeling is amazing." And then asked, "Jessica, when we were preparing for the wedding, it felt amazing too, didn't it?" But in everything he shared tonight, that moment was nowhere to be found. Between us, it felt like there were too many regrets hiding somewhere in unnamed spaces. Later, a friend from that night edited David's video and sent it into the group. By then it was already dawn. Most people had gone to sleep. Just a few scattered congratulations popped up on the screen. David was fast asleep. Hadn't seen it yet. But I opened the video again, watched it one more time. Everyone laughing happily. And only me, the unwilling spectator, watching his love for another woman unfold before my eyes. I cooked her a meal, but the food wasn't done properly, and she ended up with food poisoning, had to be hospitalized. When he said that, his hand was still holding mine, his thumb softly stroking the back of my hand, without stopping, and the guilt, the tenderness in his voice felt like they were still lingering even now. Everyone laughed at his clumsy cooking, laughed at his devotion, while I became the only one in the crowd who knew the truth, as if I was being forced to relive exactly how he once loved another girl. As though I was watching a vivid fragment of their love story play out right in front of me, a version of him, young and uncertain, that belonged only to the two of them. But when David and I met, those things had never been part of our story. We met when we were already grown, at our most mature, 2 people already steady and composed. I had never touched that naive, fumbling version of him because he had given all of it to someone else. And now, here he was, longing for her all over again. It feels like this has truly gotten under my skin. 3, 4 in the morning. The city outside so silent, I could hear the ticking of the clock with each passing second. And I just lay there, eyes wide open, unable to sleep. The 8 stories he carelessly let slip tonight. Every single word stuck in my head, looping over and over, pressing down on my chest as if someone were sitting on it. I never once imagined that between us there could exist the shadow of another woman. All this time, I believed our love, from dating to marriage, was a natural, peaceful journey. No drama, no cracks, nothing hidden beneath the surface. But looking back now, maybe it was never as tranquil as I thought. Maybe he was simply too good at hiding it. And I've never been good at noticing. I remember that day, the first time I discovered the little handwritten notes stuck everywhere, and David teased me, his eyes shining with pride. Noticed something? You almost ignored my masterpiece after all the effort I put in. I laughed back then, surprised and happy. But now that I think about it, maybe he was never as thoughtful, never as careful as I believed. Tonight, I watched him for a long time, stared so hard, it felt like I was seeing through that perfect facade. And yet, he never noticed. He was drunk, cheerful, glowing as he told those stories from the past, while I sat there silently, my eyes whispering a question he couldn't hear. David, who are you really in love with? That night, in my eyes, love no longer felt whole. It splintered into pieces, tangled somewhere between shock, resentment, and a quiet, voiceless sadness. What hurt the most was none of those feelings were noticed, let alone understood, by him. The fourth story he told, a story that didn't belong to me, was this. To make it up to her, I called her my queen every single day for an entire month. I froze when I heard that. My queen. 2 small words, but they burned straight through me. In all our years together, not once had he called me that. Not once had he softened his voice, lowered his pride, and placed me in the position of someone irreplaceable. Between David and me, we had never resolved things with sweet words or soothing gestures. Most of the time, we chose to handle any unpleasantness quickly. If there was conflict, we would sit down calmly, analyze the root, trace it back to where it started. If he was wrong, he admitted it. If I was wrong, I admitted it. Almost every issue was resolved within a day. I used to think that was rational, mature, something solid to be proud of. But tonight, he showed me a different truth. That once upon a time, he wasn't rational, he wasn't composed, he wasn't guarded. He used to bend, to stumble, to lower his ego, to chase after someone else, just to make her smile. And realizing that left me completely still. I stared at the glass of water in my hand, the light flickering faintly against the rim, and my fingers trembled. I wondered, if it had been me back then, would he have done the same for me? That was the moment jealousy seeped in. Jealousy of that David, the David of the past. The David who once loved recklessly, without hesitation, without fear. The David who once called someone his my queen, just to calm her down. The David who once carried a love big enough to put his pride aside. A love unafraid of heartbreak, unafraid of rejection. And me, I met a different David. A David who is rational, composed, controlled, measured, careful with his boundaries, but also a David who had locked away the passion, the fire, the recklessness, the very parts of him I should have been worthy of receiving. I have to admit, deep down, I've been silently comparing the David of the past with the David I have now. Between those two versions, which one was more real, which one was more deserving? I bit down lightly on my lower lip, inhaled deeply, desperately trying to find an answer just for myself. Even though, in the 8 stories he told, I had already lost once, my heart still refused to surrender. I needed to know. I needed to keep searching for an answer of my own. The 5th story he told, another one that didn't belong to me, was, she made me be her model, wearing the crop top she designed, just to show it off for her. The entire table burst into laughter, and I laughed too. A short, awkward laugh. But the tears, I didn't even notice when they had started falling, tracing down my cheeks until the salty taste touched the corner of my lips. At that dinner, I still forced myself to endure it all, keeping my expression steady, holding my smile in place so it wouldn't tremble. But now, standing here on this empty, silent street, phone glowing in my hand, I no longer had the strength to hide anything. The street lamp stood motionless, casting pale yellow light onto the damp, misty pavement. These same lights once witnessed me radiant, happy, and now they were witnessing just how completely I had lost. The sixth story he told, finally one that was actually mine, David said. In our new house, I asked her, in a few days, we'll get married, right? It was such a simple moment. But when I heard him recall it, I suddenly realized the difference between us lay right there. Out of the 8 stories, the 3 that belonged to me, each one marked a turning point in our relationship, important milestones, moments that couldn't be skipped, but the other 5 belonged to her, small, ordinary, seemingly trivial fragments of daily life. And yet it was precisely those small, quiet things that had sunk the deepest, woven themselves tightly into every corner of his memory. So much so that everywhere I looked, there was no sign of her. And yet somehow, she was everywhere. I stared at the phone, the cold blue light reflecting in my eyes, and I had to admit it, I had lost. At 5:30 in the morning, a few more stray congratulations in the group chat pushed that video to the top once again. I unlocked my screen, but I no longer had the strength to watch it a third time. After watching it twice, I already had my answer. I knew then. Those casual, seemingly insignificant stories he told carried behind them countless other moments I had never known about. And it was that second viewing that ripped apart the mask of composure I had been clinging to all night. I was forced to compare myself to a woman, someone who no longer existed in his life, yet remained vividly alive in every corner of his memories. And once again, I had lost to the space she still occupied inside him. The moment he opened his mouth and recounted those memories, everything became painfully clear. The love I had believed to be whole, to be mine entirely, was never mine the way I thought. In truth, he had only ever given me 3/8 of his heart. 3/8. The rest, he had already given away to someone who wasn't even here anymore. I had never held the advantage in the smallest details. That's why, in his eyes, I existed only in the grand moments, the milestones, the turning points of his life. But in the everyday moments, the habits, the offhand phrases, the spontaneous smiles, my presence was always fainter than hers, the girl he had once been willing to break every rule for. I stared into the dark emptiness ahead, and suddenly, my chest felt unbearably heavy, as though someone had placed a stone deep inside it. A dull, relentless ache, silent and without tears, but piercing straight to the very bottom of my heart. And within that sharp, quiet pain, I came to the bitterest conclusion of all. He never loved me that much. 6 in the morning, my phone vibrated, David's name lighting up the screen. I stared at the incoming call for a moment, hesitated, then picked up. His voice was hoarse, still carrying the faint trace of alcohol in every breath. But there was no anger, no demand to know why I had disappeared all night. He only asked one question. "Jessica, where are you?" At that moment, I could almost hear the silent time bomb inside the group chat finally exploding. After he had sobered up, after the memories he unconsciously revealed were no longer secrets, I tightened my grip on the phone, forcing my voice to stay calm as I asked back, "What are you so tense about?" On the other end, his tone dropped lower. "Jessica, you didn't come home all night." I exhaled softly, stood up, and instinctively adjusted the hem of my shirt, as though trying to gather what little composure I had left. I had spent the entire night wandering through the dark corners of my heart, digging through every memory, every gap inside this love, and finally, I understood everything. At the very least, those sleepless hours weren't wasted. At the very least, after staring straight into the truth, I knew it was time to start learning how to let go. He said he would come pick me up, even guessed the exact place I was standing, as if he had always known my habits, my familiar paths. I didn't stop him. By then, the storm in my head had finally shattered into pieces, giving way to a heavy exhaustion that draped over me like a thick curtain. And as the dizziness settled, an overwhelming wave of drowsiness came crashing down, heavy and sudden, like unexpected rain. More than arguing, more than trying to fight him off, in that moment, all I wanted was to sleep. Thankfully, before leaving the house, I had the sense to grab my documents. I found a small hotel nearby, checked in, and collapsed onto the bed. Tonight, I would let him face those 8 stories, the ones he himself had told, and figure out on his own what I had been thinking all night. When I woke up, the dim light of the late morning filtered faintly through the curtains. I unlocked my phone. A flood of messages and missed calls filled the screen. David's notifications tangled with the group chat, blinking endlessly like a relentless alarm. The congratulations in the chat kept climbing, steady, nonstop. Someone even joked, "When you pick Jessica up, David, make sure you're ready to sing karaoke well, or we're not letting you take her anywhere." I let out a soft, soundless laugh. They had no idea that while they were celebrating this love, I had been standing on the sidelines, watching my heart quietly walk away from the very story I once thought would last forever. David was never the kind of man who liked sharing his love life. Throughout our relationship, his friends had only been part of it once, the day he confessed to me. All our happy moments, our arguments, our suffocating silences, they had never seen any of it. Even his past relationship they knew almost nothing about. And maybe that's why, when he told those 8 stories, they naturally assumed they were all about us. They cheered, they laughed, they congratulated us. And a massive misunderstanding was born, hidden beneath the loud applause. While they were busy celebrating, we were busy falling apart. In some ways, that video in the group chat became the clearest piece of evidence to convict David. It couldn't be erased. Everyone had watched it, heard it, felt it. And from that moment on, he no longer even had the chance to explain that these were just unconscious words after a night of drinking. The narrative was too clear. Each sentence, each word, deliberate and precise, from beginning to end. The beginning of the story was me. The middle belonged to them. And the ending somehow circled back to me. I honestly didn't know anymore. Between the two of us, who was the shadow of whom? Was I the one intruding into a past already carved in stone? Or was he the one who had unknowingly lost me inside the memories of someone else? There was only one thing I knew for sure. No one can accept the presence of another person's shadow in their own love story. His way of thinking hasn't changed. Still the same as it's always been between us, untouched, unshaken. He said running away isn't the way to solve anything, that I should come out and meet him, sit down, and talk it through. I didn't disagree, it's just that I needed one night to make up for the sleep I'd lost. One night to stitch together whatever little strength I had left, to steady a heart that had been drifting endlessly like a boat tossed around in a storm. Only after that could I sit across from him, look him straight in the eye, and have a real conversation. Between us, there aren't that many places that hold our memories. So when he searched and searched, in the end, he could only wait for me at the same steps from all those years ago. The steps where we first met, where he had once leaned down, asking softly, "Are you okay? Can I help you with anything?" Back then, I smiled. Back then, we began a story we thought would last forever. I don't know. While he was standing there, waiting, if he sat down and went through every word, every detail of those 8 stories in his head, each thing he told that night carries weight, heavy enough to match the 5/8 of quiet ache I've been carrying inside me. We sat next to each other on the same steps as before, like a perfect loop. Just like that day years ago, when he tilted his head, asked if I was uncomfortable, then quietly sat beside me and said softly, "I can help you." This time, he didn't defend himself. He didn't try to weave together excuses or explanations. He was clear, direct, taking responsibility. He looked me in the eye, his voice low, as if holding back everything at once. "Jessica, I'm sorry. I was drunk. The things I let slip out, even I couldn't control them." I looked at him, silent, inhaling deeply, then exhaling slowly. Inside, something twisted sharply, bitter and quiet. In this life, the things we can't control aren't just sudden sleepiness or an unexpected sneeze. There are also feelings you can't hide, and memories you can't suppress. I clenched my hands, then spoke slowly, each word cutting into me as I said it. "David, let's stop here. If your heart is still carrying someone you can't forget, then I choose to let go. I don't want to stay with someone who loves me, and yet longs for someone else. Or maybe I no longer even know. Whether you still love me or not." In that moment, he held my hand tightly, his eyes almost pleading. "Jessica, all of that, it's in the past. We're fine now. Don't let a few words erase everything." He lowered his head, his voice trembling but steady. "I love you. I'm loving you for real. From now on, I won't drink anymore. I'll never let something like this happen again." I turned to look at him. In the soft, pale light of the early morning, I saw two versions of him existing at once. One David, honest and sincere, wanting to protect this love, and another David, where the ghosts of old memories refused to rest, slipping through, haunting, casting a faint shadow across everything. He wants me to pretend I never heard, never knew. But the feelings he exposed, I've turned them over and over, counted them again and again, read them until I'm exhausted, disappointed, until I couldn't sleep the entire night. I looked off into the distance, the morning wind sweeping past, sharp and cold against my skin. And in that moment, I asked myself, how do you choose to forget? After that, I went through a rushed, chaotic wedding cancellation. Inside that cramped little room, the whispers piled on top of each other, heavy enough to make it hard to breathe. Our parents sat across from each other, their eyes following my every tiny movement, as if trying to figure out whether there was still any chance for David and me to go back to how we used to be. I sat still, both hands resting on my lap, quietly staring down at the cold tiled floor. Under the table, David gently reached for my hand, but I pulled away immediately, the motion sharp and cold. He froze, startled, while I pressed my lips together tightly, the storm inside me surging violently. The weight of everything pushed me past my limit, and I lashed out, my voice breaking the air. And in an instant, his parents turned to scold him harshly. The air around us cracked open, filled with raised voices, sighs, muffled sobs, all tangled into one chaotic mess, until his mother spoke a sentence that tore everything apart. "She died in that car accident long ago. What on earth are you still losing your mind over?" At that moment, I went completely still. So this was it. I hadn't just lost to another woman. I had lost to a memory, one that had turned into a ghost. Right after, David broke down crying. The sound of his sobs echoed through the crowded room, shaking, uneven, like a child lost in the dark. And me, my heart splintered so deeply I couldn't stay there another second. I stood up, turned away, and left everything behind. I filed for leave, got in my car, and drove out of the city. I needed my own sky, a quiet place to breathe, to think about everything, or maybe to begin learning how to forget. On the highway, the wind roared past my ears, but inside me, the chaos was louder than ever. I thought about the countless drives with him, David always sitting in the passenger seat, constantly reminding me, "Careful, watch out, a car's coming from the left." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Maybe those words weren't meant for me. He was speaking to her. The thought caught in my throat, choking me. Tears spilled down, burning hot as they soaked into the steering wheel. Just like David couldn't bear hearing anything about that accident, I couldn't bear knowing that, even in our story, the shadow of another woman lingered everywhere I turned. 3 days later, David came. I was lying on a lounge chair outside a small cabin in the woods. Sunlight filtered gently through the tall pines, scattering over my skin. A shadow fell across my face. I opened my eyes. It was him. David smiled faintly and asked softly, "Still mad at me?" I turned away. I had never kept secrets from him, not even this hidden retreat, this little cabin in the woods. I had told him about it long ago. So, of course, even if I wanted to hide, he would find me, effortlessly, as though there had never been any distance between us. He dragged over a wooden chair and sat down next to me. The mountain breeze carried the earthy scent of pine and wild grass, and he glanced around, smiling slightly. "It's beautiful here. The air feels so fresh." His voice was exactly the same as the first time we came here. Gentle, calm. But this time, I could hear a quiet longing buried beneath it. I remembered that day when I first brought him to this cabin, as a gift, my answer to the grand confession he had once spent so much time preparing for me. Back then, when the car left the city and wound through the twisting mountain roads, David leaned over and asked, "Where are we going?" I laughed and replied, "I'm kidnapping you to my secret hideaway." He burst out laughing, raising both hands in mock surrender. "Why kidnap me? I'd go willingly." "Jessica, wherever you go, I'll follow." When we reached the cabin, he didn't ask any more questions. He simply stepped out of the car, took my hand, and walked with me along the tree-lined path, past the cabin owner, waving from afar. I opened the wooden door, turned to him, and smiled. "David, welcome to Jessica's world." That day, I opened my heart. I led him into a private world I had always kept hidden, guarded like a treasure. I believed this place would always belong to just the two of us. That evening, we walked the trail circling the cabin, hand in hand, laughing and talking about the future. The tiny buzzing insects near my ears annoyed me, and David took out bug spray, carefully spraying each red mark on my skin while teasing, "Never seen anyone loved by insects as much as you are." I laughed, but he suddenly stared at me for a long time before saying, in all seriousness, "No wonder they like you. Even I do." In that moment, I believed him completely. But tonight, sitting here in the same place, looking at him, everything felt different. My voice was hoarse, drained. When I asked, "Did you book a ride back yet?" he answered with his own question. "When are you coming home?" I lay back on the sofa, replying weakly, "No rush. I took leave. I plan to stay here a while." David stepped outside to make a call, and when he returned, he looked at me and said, "I took leave too. However long you're here, I'll stay with you." I frowned slightly, suggesting he book his own room. He shook his head. "No need. I'll just sleep on the floor in your room." I glanced at him, then asked quietly, "Do you want a drink?" Silence hung between us for a while. I looked down at the glass of wine in my hand, the deep red surface catching the light, and thought about that night, the party that was supposed to celebrate us. But in the end, it was that wine that forced me to see the truth. The deepest parts of his heart weren't mine. I took a slow breath, stared straight at him, and asked, "David, the accident, what really happened?" The moment the word accident left my lips, his face turned pale instantly. My voice trembled as I continued. "It was you driving her that night, wasn't it? And then the crash?" He shook his head. A long silence filled the air before he finally spoke, haltingly, as though pulling each word from the bottom of his chest. She was driving. A car ran a red light. A drunk driver hit her straight on. By the time I got there, she wasn't breathing anymore." 2 short sentences, but he had to pause several times, breathing heavily, before forcing them out. And in that moment, I understood. David wasn't afraid of driving because of the crash. He was afraid of reliving the moment he lost the woman he loved most. That girl, she died at the exact moment he loved her the most. And all those little memories he recited flawlessly at the party, they weren't random. They were the result of him replaying her over and over again, so many times that every single detail had been etched into his mind, permanently. Otherwise, how could he remember every detail, every small thing, every fleeting moment with her, while forgetting the same kind of memories with me? In that moment, I faced a cruel truth. In David's heart, there's a space that will never belong to me. When he said he wanted to have a serious talk, I stayed lying on the sofa, my back turned to him, refusing once again to engage. He stood there, his voice lower now, saying, "That was over 10 years ago, Jessica. Don't hold it in your heart anymore." He told me plainly that I had brought him a sense of peace, a happiness he'd never had before. And then he leaned slightly, looked at me, and whispered, "Jessica, I really want to spend my life with you." He also made it clear that if I could forgive him, everything would go back to the way it was. In his eyes, the past 2 days were nothing more than a few small sulks of mine, nothing worth mentioning. But inside me, everything had changed. Outside, the congratulations in the group chat kept climbing, the notifications popping up endlessly on my phone screen, like the only thing missing was a thank you from the two main characters to wrap it all up. Then he began bringing up our memories, the ones he thought would soften me, like the time it poured, and I stood outside his office building, holding an umbrella, his texts telling me to go home, coming nonstop. But I stubbornly waited, like the times he cooked endless dishes just to indulge my picky taste, carefully tending to every little thing, like how every one of my social media handles was somehow tied to his name. He looked up at me, his voice trembling. "Jessica, we used to love each other this much, didn't we?" I bit my lip, tears stinging my eyes. The buried resentment in me, just thinking about it, made my whole body shake. I asked him, "If we had so many memories like that, why didn't you share them? You've cooked for me so many times, but the one you remembered was the time undercooked food sent someone else to the hospital." I looked at him, my voice hoarse. "David, the one who feels wronged here is me. Only I get to decide if you're worth forgiving." I brought up the ratio. The 3/8. "David, what makes you think giving me 3/8 of yourself is enough?" That night, I waited until he fell asleep, then walked lightly, afraid of waking him, but also afraid of softening again, one more time. After everything I said, the thing he repeated most was still just, "I'm sorry." But those apologies? I no longer needed them. I don't even know if what we have counts as betrayal or not. Maybe, like he said, he truly tried his best to treat me well. It's just that his best was never his whole heart. And me, I'm the stubborn one, the one who demands something absolute, something whole. I want a love that is complete, untouched, without any part belonging to someone else. But sadly, that's something he could never give me. As I walked out to the parking lot, David chased behind me while I ran ahead, the wind slapping my face, tears blurring my vision. It felt like a dramatic scene out of a movie, but I knew, in his memory, it probably wouldn't even hold a place. Just like that time when he had a high fever, and I stayed awake the entire night taking care of him, only for him to hold my hand the next morning and keep saying, "I really made you work so hard." And yet, that night, he couldn't even remember. He will never remember what existed between us, while I remember everything, every detail, every moment, without missing a single thing. It's not fair. In his heart, he gave someone else the bigger place first, and only afterward came back to love me. That was never fair. But if anyone were to ask about our story, every detail, every single thing in it, would still be about him. And somehow, that makes it even more unfair. Because as long as I still love him, This imbalance will always exist. The silence between us grew so heavy that even his friends began to notice. One friend asked to talk with me, but when David appeared, he just patted his shoulder and left, muttering, "Bro, I've done all I can. The rest is on you. You called her Queen before, right? Say it again. If that doesn't work, call her my everything." A man trying to keep his wife shouldn't hesitate. David turned his head to look at me, and I was already looking at him too. That night, he had taken someone else's stories and presented them as ours. And now, no one on the outside could guess what we were really fighting about. They even advised him to repeat those very gestures, to fix us. He sat across from me, his eyes tired, and asked, "Where have you been these past few days?" He said he went to every place we'd ever been together, and still couldn't find me. I looked at him and gave a small, cold smile. Everyone has secrets, don't they? Like how I have a secret base you don't know about. And you never told me either that you've been living in the past. He opened his mouth to apologize again, but to me, his apologies no longer carried any weight. Still, I thought to myself, at least he didn't try to defend himself. Or maybe, from that very night, when he confidently told those stories in front of everyone, he had already shut the door on any chance to explain. He only whispered, "Jessica, believe me, I really love you." I frowned slightly as I looked at him. That's how people are. When they're at their most unreasonable, they always reach for "I love you" to fix everything. I looked at him, speaking slowly. If you love me, then why, in my story, are there so many pieces of another woman everywhere? By the time we stepped outside, the sun was already setting. A pale golden light stretched across the California coast, and out of habit, his gaze drifted toward the horizon. The first time we met, he once pointed at the sun and said, "Jessica, isn't that the sunset? My favorite moment of the day, the exact moment the sun goes down." He had joked then, "Guess I've been lucky enough to find two sunsets in my life." I remember once, on a trip, we kept getting lost in the mountains, the winding roads confusing us endlessly. He pulled me down onto a bench by the side of the road, wiping his forehead, saying, "Let's wait here for a bit." I asked, "Wait for what?" He looked at me, smiled, and replied, "Wait for Jessica to give us an answer." So we sat there, in silence, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. As darkness fell, he suddenly pulled me into his arms and kissed me. A kiss so natural, so unexpected, so intense. He said, "See, the meaning of a trip isn't about the destination. As long as I'm with the person I love, whatever we do, wherever we go, it's worth it." And now, sitting beside him, my chest tightened painfully. Because I suddenly understood. At some point in the past, he had done all of this before, but with another woman. He once said the exact same words, once watched the same kind of sunsets. The only difference was, the person standing next to him back then wasn't me. Turns out everything had just been copy and paste. And me, I had lost completely to the original. Only now, he finally began to vaguely realize the problem, calling me, his voice hoarse, asking about the wedding ring. "Do you know where you left it?" I gripped the phone tightly in my hand and replied slowly, "I took it with me." On the other end, his breathing hitched slightly. Then he asked again, his voice lower, "Can I come and get it?" "I just want to see it one last time." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and released 3 deliberate words. "I threw it away." The silence on the other end stretched long and heavy, so much so that I could hear the faint sound of the wind outside. I knew he understood me better than anyone. He knew that if I could do something that final, it meant that night. I had been hurt beyond measure. But him, through the entire night, he was drunk, oblivious, completely unaware. He didn't realize I had sat there quietly, alone, watching him boast, piece by piece, about how he had once loved someone else, how deeply, how fiercely. And I kept asking myself, if that's how he loved her, then how exactly does he love me? I couldn't stop myself from comparing, over and over again, endlessly torturing myself with those 5 stories. I even wondered, if I had been the one taking up 5/8 of those memories, would I feel any better? Thinking about it carefully, maybe not. Because the problem was never about who has more. The problem was, I can't accept that he doesn't love me completely. I know I can't step into his past. I understand that. He can have loved someone else before, but he can't keep loving them forever. In my world, it should only ever be me and him. Only our story. The shadow of someone else doesn't belong in the chapters I am still writing. And yet, that night, in the middle of all the laughter and the cheers, I realized this story was never mine alone. He stayed quiet for a long time, then finally said, his voice rough, "Jessica, I have a way to fix everything." I looked out the window, pale light spilling across the wooden floor, and asked calmly, "What way?" He answered, almost whispering, "What if we try again?" Let me retell the 8 stories, but this time they'll be ours. Or 10 stories if you want. I promise, this time, every single one will be about you. I froze. In that moment, I understood what it means when people are pushed to their limits. They'll reach for anything, no matter how clumsy or absurd. And this was his idea of a solution, naive, almost laughable, the kind of thing that leaves you torn between wanting to cry or to smile. I didn't even know why, but part of me wanted to give him that chance. Maybe because I understood. Words spoken carelessly, without thought, and words chosen deliberately after sobering up. They aren't the same thing. Maybe, after waking up and re-watching that video, he'd started thinking, trying desperately to recall every single thing between us. If I really wanted to, I could name hundreds of our memories too. The small ones, the little fragments scattered through the corners of our everyday life. Everywhere we've been, we've left traces of us. But the problem is, when it mattered, he didn't speak. And now, when everything's already shattered, he's scrambling to say them again. If you think about it carefully, it doesn't hold much meaning anymore. I looked at him, imagining him painstakingly sorting through every memory, separating, measuring, trying to choose which ones were truly ours and which ones belonged to someone else, leaving him exhausted, confused, even at odds with himself. I asked him softly, my voice catching, "Do you remember the video I once sent you? The one where the groom accidentally called the wrong name during the wedding?" He nodded. I continued, "David, you know, back then, all I felt was secondhand embarrassment for the bride in that video, having the entire room witness that the groom loved someone else, not her. But now that I've lived through something like it, I finally understand. The deepest pain isn't the humiliation, it's the heartbreak." I looked straight at him, every word falling heavy as stone. "You could talk about marriage with me so easily, while your heart belonged to someone else. David, if we keep going like this, sooner or later there'll come a day. The day when everyone will be there, watching me become the joke. Not like now, where they don't know, where only I sit here quietly, fully aware of how deeply you once loved her. And me, knowing you don't love me enough. Why should I wait for that day, just to hear you remind me again, I don't love you?" I shook my head slowly, forcing a faint, bitter smile. Once was more than enough. He kept shaking his head, denying, his voice trembling. "That won't happen." "Jessica, I'll be careful. I promise." But all I felt was exhaustion, swallowing me whole. Because if even the words, "Jessica, I love you," require care to not confuse, then what meaning does this love even have anymore? A love that doesn't come from the heart, one born out of restraint, calculation, an attempt to make up after a mistake, only makes me realize how much I've failed myself, how small I've made myself, to love someone this imperfect, this incomplete, with everything I had. And I understood then, life is full of unconscious slips, moments of impulse. I don't blame him for one drunken night, but I know, this isn't just about one night. There will be countless other moments, like when he wakes up half asleep, accidentally calling another name, like when he sees something beautiful and instinctively leans over, murmuring another name. And me, what am I supposed to do then? Cry every time? Scream that he doesn't love me enough? Will I spend the rest of my life reminding him that I'm the one standing next to him? I stepped onto a random bus. No destination, no plan. I just knew I had to leave this place. Leave all the stories clinging to me that refused to let go. The bus swayed through familiar streets, carrying me to the other side of the city, where there were no congratulatory messages, where no one spoke of the memories I wanted to erase. The lazy sunlight spilled through the window, scattering across my face, warm yet distant. I leaned against the glass, watching the skyscrapers blur past, and somewhere in that blur, I saw old shadows. Me and David, once walking hand in hand down these same streets, once standing before a wedding boutique where he waved me over, pointing at a white dress behind the glass, his eyes bright as he said, "Jessica, what if we take on different names just to be together?" Back then, I believed happiness was within reach, as simple as stretching out my hand to take it. But now, on this bus, with everything broken, I suddenly realized those memories are just shadows now, fading into the crowded streets outside. I don't force myself to forget, but I no longer feel the need to hold on either, because I understand some things, no matter how tightly you try to keep them, will never belong to you. When the bus reached its final stop, Joe, one of David's friends, was waiting. I wasn't surprised. After all, I knew our breakup had already slipped out, whispered in some careless conversation between his parents. And once everyone knew, the opinions came flooding in. Some stood with me, saying no one could swallow this kind of humiliation. Others scolded me for being too stubborn, throwing away years of love over just one night. But Joe was different. He looked at me, hesitation mixed with quiet sympathy in his eyes, and said, "I think you and David can still fix this." I gave a faint smile and asked, "Did David send you?" Joe shook his head. It was David's parents. They liked me, didn't want to lose me, so they asked him to try one last time. He said softly, "Jessica, that girl, she's gone. She can't threaten what you two have anymore." I stayed silent. In my story, she was never the enemy. She and I never met, never knew each other. It was David who brought her into my world, placing her shadow in the middle of us, letting it crack us from within. And I understood something painfully clear. The living can never win against the dead. And faced with a battle I already knew I'd lose, I never even tried to fight. But Joe didn't give up. He pulled out his phone, called David, put it on speaker and said, "David, right now, tell me 8 things about Jessica." Maybe worried David didn't grasp the weight of this, he added, "Jessica's sitting right here, listening." The line went silent for a few seconds. Then David said 2 short words. "Wait a sec." And after that came a long, suffocating silence, heavy like a verdict. That silence told me more than any explanation ever could. It was that simple. If he could have just named 8 things about me, a dish I love, a song I always play, a street I adore, even just my license plate number, and yet he couldn't say a single one. And then finally, after more than a minute that stretched out like a lifetime, he said only this. "Jessica said she wants to go skiing this winter." Joe laughed, but it was bitter, laced with frustration. "Christ, David. In the time you hesitated, I could have listed 8 things myself." I stayed silent, smiled faintly, nodded goodbye to Joe, and walked away. And in that moment, I didn't feel sad anymore. The disappointment had quietly turned into something else, a strange, unexpected relief. Relief, because finally, I had my answer. In life, there are thousands of ways to handle a problem. You either close your eyes and swallow it, or you choose to let go at the right moment. I chose the second, because if love has to be begged for, if love has to be constantly reminded, if love survives only through effort and force, then it isn't love anymore. That day, the last thing Joe said to me was, "Jessica, maybe the ones who stay clear-headed hurt the most, but they're also the ones who heal." And now, I believe he was right. As I stepped out of the station, the afternoon breeze brushing softly against my hair, I felt a strange kind of peace bloom in my chest. I had finally begun learning how to let go, to look at the things that once broke me with a quieter heart. Not because I've forgotten David, but because I've chosen to forgive myself. I'm not built to save someone from the ghosts of their past. I can accept that he once loved someone else, but I cannot accept a love where he gives me only a small corner of his heart and calls it everything. I believe that one day I'll meet someone who will give me their whole heart, holding nothing back. And if a choice leaves me shattered, then it was never meant to be my only choice in this life. Letting go isn't forgetting. It's learning how to keep walking, even when the memories stay.